Hello everybody and welcome to this short video, hopefully short video, on AppTem and how to comply. This is about the tripartite prep form. These phrases, words, etc. might be unfamiliar to you, and hopefully by the time we come to the end you'll have some clue what I'm talking about. So the aims of this presentation, by the end you should understand what AppTem is, that you will learn how to comply and monitoring requirements, and start to do this, and you will complete your part of the tripartite prep form. So what is AppTem? It's a proprietary system or app for recording and monitoring information for the program. You can see this is what their website looks like. This is their little sign-in logo, all these wonderful people that they're involved with, and justifications or rationale for why we do this. One version of the truth. Well, the university gathers this information and is accountable, as are you, as am I suppose, and for ensuring that this stuff is done, because there are compliance requirements imposed by Ofsted and by ESFA. ESFA is the Education and Skills Funding Agency. So you know this apprenticeship program is paid out of an apprenticeship levy. Your employers are essentially paying. And I don't think it's any surprise. The short answer is it's about money and compliance with the regulators. You have to demonstrate that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. So what do you have to do as an apprentice in terms of AppTem? You have 3 of these tripartite reviews a year to do. They'll be signed off by yourself, a KU staff member, and an employer rep. More about that later. And you have to upload your learning logs. So that tracks essentially the hours that you were completing while you were on the course. So as I said, 3 of these a year. But before you do the full review, you do a tripartite prep form. This actually saves a lot of time, and really the main function of this video is to go through that and tell you what you have to do. You'll later on meet with the apprentice, mentor, KU staff, once this form has been completed and various things have been done with it, and you will complete the review. I'll talk about that here. A little bit too much bureaucratic information for one video, but there will be a follow-up to show you what to do when you have finished the prep form. Now, there's a template for this in Canvas in the module documents folder, and I do intend to facilitate some live sessions so people can actually do this as they follow me through the instructions. But you can also access this recording and use that as a way of completing the form. So when I say we're going to start this now, well, you can, but you might just be looking at this for information. Once you've finished that form, you'll send it off to your mentor. Mentors will also be able to access this particular little video. So let's crack on, why don't we? A little bit of terminology, you're probably quite used to this by now, but it's kind of unique to apprenticeship programs. So just to be clear, on-the-job learning, or sometimes training, depending what you're reading, is learning in your place of employment, quite simply, straightforward. That'll be your 4 days a week or 3 days a week if you're part-time. Off-the-job learning, again, sometimes training, is learning at the university or on your self-directed study days. There's a little symbol here, you'll see it in a few slides, and that is where the employer rep, usually the mentor, has to give an answer. Simple as. So you've got the template. Complete these things in red as you go through the presentation. There's also a guidance document on Canvas that I'll be uploading in due course. Some people might find that easier to use, but so you get this information in a number of different ways. This little bit of text here, I'm not going to read it through, but that's typical of the kind of thing that is in the guidance document. So let's go on to the template. This is what it looks like at the top. There'll be a little Kingston logo up here. The bits in red are things that you have to fill in. It's kind of self-explanatory. These little boxes down at the bottom will come pre-filled, as it were. So once you do that, you move on to question number 1. And the first time you do this, perhaps makes less sense than it will do later on, because what progress do you feel since the last tripartite meeting? Well, there hasn't been one, but you have been on the course. You've been on the course for maybe 2 or 3 months by the time you see this. And you can talk about how you're settling in, how you find your first assignment, because certainly you have already, I hope, submitted that. Time of recording, um, that's where it was at for 4011. And straight into two. So you'll see that you've said about progression, and now the mentor gets to make a comment. For both of these, I do not expect reams and reams and paragraphs. Make your life easy. You'll have enough forms and compliance and other things to complete, and you don't have to put in a great deal of detail. You absolutely must do these forms. There's no two ways about it. But, make it easier on yourself. Don't do too detailed a job. Then we move on to the third question, which is about, are you struggling with anything? Is there anything you need to kind of talk about? First of all, you get a little yes or no option. Tick one of those little boxes, and then it moves on to the next question. If you are struggling, please specify. Now, just note here, it's very generic. It gets a little bit more specific later on. But here, it's probably going to be about how do you get used to this transition to doing a social work course? Or trying to balance out work-life study. Maybe you have childcare responsibilities. Maybe you need a little academic support in writing assignments and things of that nature. It's been a while since you've done any study of any description. So again, just brief details here. You don't have to include confidential information, but it's a good idea just to kind of make a note here, because then perhaps maybe we'll try to do something about it. It moves on to, do you feel you're on track with your 20% off the job training hours? Now, as I said earlier, off the job is when you're in the university or on self-guided study. Now, if there's anything interfering with those days, for example, if your manager is calling you into work on a day when you should be in university, this is the place to note it. And as a university, we would feel responsible for doing something about that. Or maybe it's the university is at fault. Is there something that we are doing or not doing that's making life more difficult than it needs to be? Again, you do not need to provide an enormous amount of detail, but it's your opportunity to say something about that if you need to. So, yeah, the question is slightly oddly phrased, but if you are not on track with the 20% of off-the-job learning hours, it's very rare that we have a problem with that. In general, our attendance is really excellent on the course. People quite often have to make quite considerable effort to actually get to Kingston. So it's quite admirable that demonstrates people's commitment to their own the course and their own personal and professional development. I've said that phrase many times. I don't know why I stuttered over it right there and then. So again, unlikely, but if there are issues to report, please use that space to do so. Again, keep it to more like a bullet point than a paragraph, if you see what I mean. So this is one of the comments that the employer has to add here again. It may be kind of, for example, it might be other things, but there may be workload or work case issues that need managing. And again, this will be a good place to make a note of those things. When I say make a note, I am presuming that would result in something happening in the real world. I hope I've been clear enough about that. Now there's a generic question about support from both the employer and Kingston University. If you're not getting that support, there's first of all the yes/no option. Let's see what happens after you take that particular option. So if yes, you can describe the support. Now, this might be a great many things. You might have a statement of support needs, for example, that is actually being actioned. Now, there is no need to include confidential information here. So the chances are, if you were receiving additional support or needed to access additional support, there's probably a process, or I would hope, or a discussion going on about that. That stuff will be recorded elsewhere. So here you could just give the briefest of description um, about the support being received. Or it might be more general. You might be able to say something like, I get on really well with my mentor. I find them incredibly helpful, and the sessions that we have together are really helping me. And then we move on to 9. Do you feel the support is reflective? It's a little bit repetitive, that, isn't it? But in any event, you can give your own opinion there if you think it's effective or not. And you might also say when you feel it is not effective. If either the mentor, the employer, the work situation, something about Kingston University, the Kingston University staff, whatever it might be, are not supporting you in the way that you would feel important, effective. Um, so here you should describe things as honestly as you can. But of course, there's a little bit of issue about power, truth here, is there not? Or potentially, at least, something to consider. Mostly, apprentices feel quite comfortable in saying what they need and they advocate for it. But we also have to consider the person who might not feel quite so comfortable with that. So, a little reflection. This might sound like going off on a tangent. There's always a possibility of learning, even from the most boring bureaucratic form. So what is it to speak truth to power? This phrase, speaking truth to power, was from a Quaker organization in the 1950s. Quakers are a Christian denomination who are very much committed to non-violence, pacifism, for example. Um, a Quaker would not be volunteering for the army, things of that nature. So it's a way of life, it's part of their belief system. And the person who the phrase is attributed to, and certainly contributed to this report, was a man called Bayard Rustin. And you can see a little picture of him there. Now, Bayard was quite the person. He was an activist, a freedom rider, community organizer, somebody who wrote about kind of changing the world, essentially, really, but changing the world through non-violent means. He had his own challenges as a black man in the deep south and freedom run. This was not necessarily a safe place. And he was also a gay man, which at that time, in the 1950s, presented its own unique challenges. A very different social context would no doubt have been very challenging for him. But he was very upfront about this. So vocal proponent of non-violent activism. There are other kind of times and places over the centuries where this has been practiced in ancient Greece. There's a word for speaking truth to power, which is parrhesia. Gandhi, again, a significant proponent of non-violent resistance, called this satyagraha, and he meant a bit more than just speaking truth, which no doubt Bayard also meant, but acting in a way that was in congruence with that notion. And this, again, an echo from Islam. This is from a hadith. Uh, a direct quote or a translation in any event. The most excellent jihad is when one speaks a true word in the presence of a tyrannical ruler. Now, clearly, there's always a risk to doing such a thing. And for those of you who might be kind of wondering about the word jihad in there and have a kind of received notion about what that means, that actually means struggle. That's actually the closest translation that you can come to about what that means. So there are challenges in speaking truth to power. Do we feel safe enough to do so? Do we feel confident enough? Do we feel we're being heard? So all of those things might come into a person's decision about what they speak and what they don't speak. But even the idea of itself of speaking truth to power is subject, in its own way, to potential criticism. This is Noam Chomsky, a very well-known American intellectual and academic, and an activist in his own way. And he says, power knows the truth already and is busy concealing it. He's not a conspiracy theorist, incidentally, but I think he speaks the truth about the world rather, and the way things are organized. So he says, it is those who are oppressed who need to hear the truth, and that we need to speak truth to the powerless. social workers with a professional role uh, of advocacy and support, perhaps working with people who don't have a lot of power, perhaps our own experience of speaking truth to power within our organizations might be something we will consider. Actually working with human beings out there in the real world. It might be something that might teach us something about how we might approach that. So enough reflection, just off the cuff, not exactly off the cuff. I did do slides for it after all. But then it comes on to employer common sense. Quite often the employer, I mean, if it's yes, everything's going well, they're not really going to have a great deal to say here, is it? But that would be a good thing if they are able to comment um, positively about support. Employer, you'll see the phrase, I'm just copying exactly what appears in the form, but employer, as I've said a few times before, actually generally means the mentor. But that's the last question that they have to do. And then you're done. Yay, we've completed the form. And I think by now you'll have noticed that those questions 2, 7, and 12 require a response from your mentor. So you could sit side by side and doing these things, but far more typically the apprentice is typing this up and then send to your mentor, maybe point out to them where they have to make a contribution and ask them to complete that ASAP, please, and send it back to you. So then the apprentice has the prep form. Yay! It really, I mean, I cannot tell you how much time this saves, but in any event, once you have completed the form, send it to the relevant member of staff. You'll get an announcement about that. We'll tell you what to do, etc., etc. So don't worry about that right now. But it's the staff member is going to upload that onto Aptem. Again, it does save time. Sometimes the apprentice does it, but at the start of your course, probably be easier if somebody else does it, because otherwise you'll have to navigate the various systems that are involved. At that stage, then you'll progress to arranging a meeting between the apprentice, the mentor, and the Kingston University staff member to complete the review. There is, of course, another video about that, how you do it, what you do, etc., etc. I think that's quite enough for one video, don't you? So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you in the next recording. Oh, I'm trying to turn it off now.